This video is made possible thanks to Olafly, offering unlimited data for your next trip in seconds. More on that in a moment. What a mess in the Middle East. We know, because it's no longer a leak, but a flood of information, that Trump has been trying for weeks to escape the hornet's nest of the Persian Gulf. But there's no way out. The Iranians aren't backing down. They know that this is their golden opportunity and aren't willing to give in easily. And this could cause a massive rift in the White House. Obviously, if things don't get sorted out, someone is going to have to take the fall. Hegseth may be on the front lines, but whatever happens in Iran will directly affect the line of succession. That is, the Republican candidate in 2028. Hold on a minute, did you think it was a done deal? That Vance would be the candidate? Well, I think we need to talk about the new darling of the Oval Office, Marco Antonio Rubio.
People like you. You know, Marco got 100% of the votes when he was in confirmation. I think our next one was about 54%. And some of the Democrats are now saying, I can't believe we approved that guy. And he said it's an honor that they feel that way, right, Marco? You have done a great job, great Secretary of State. I think he'll go down as the best ever.
The Pentagon, the Treasury, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the CIA, and of course, the State Department. They've all been very busy lately trying to fulfill the president's wishes. But if anyone has stood out above all the others in recent months, if anyone seems closest to the president, it is precisely the subject of today's video. Marco Rubio has gained so much ground that some already believe he could challenge J.D. Vance for the Republican nomination in 2028, which in itself represents a huge shift. A quantum leap for a guy whose appointment raised many doubts.
Trump's Rubio pick divides Republicans. Rubio received praise from various Republicans and Democrats. Those in the so-called MAGA wing of the GOP have expressed a mix of surprise and disappointment about the pick.
Rubio was considered practically the least MAGA-aligned figure in the cabinet. In fact, the announcement of his appointment was delayed longer than expected, and no one was sure to what extent Trump, known for his vindictive nature, would forgive him for his past hostility during the 2016 primaries, when Marco Rubio went so far as to say things like this about the current president.
He began to explain to the American people that Donald Trump is a con artist.
Marco Rubio, Donald Trump is the most vulgar person to run for the US president ever.
To make matters worse, his profile didn't seem to quite fit either.
In deep MAGA circles, Rubio is seen as representative of the old Republican Party, a politician with a globalist and interventionist vision, a hawk on foreign policy who strays far from the characteristic isolationism of this movement. Rubio supports Ukraine, is pro-NATO, is hostile toward Russia, and wants the United States to control the Americas as it sees fit. And not only that, his own Latino roots and his closeness to Hispanic communities also don't quite align with the more nationalist and identity-driven vision held by a significant portion of this movement.
In fact, for months, the bet in Washington was on how long he would last in Trump's cabinet. And yet, here we are. Rubio has gone from being the most questioned member to practically becoming one of its biggest rock stars. So what happened? Well, Rubio's position has changed radically. When he was appointed, everyone assumed his role would be secondary because, with Trump, diplomacy is largely left to the White House. That Rubio's work would be limited to the Americas and little else. But that hasn't been the case. This former Florida senator has managed to climb to the front lines of this administration, to the point of becoming the president's true favorite.
And Marco, you really did yourself proud 2 days ago in Munich. In fact, so proud that I almost terminated his employee, because they were saying, why can't Trump do this? I do, but I say it differently. But Marco, don't do any better than you did, please. Because if you do, you're out of here.
And no wonder, the Venezuela coup, the Cuba operation, the ability to apply pressure in Europe when things were spiraling out of control. In recent months, Marco Rubio has racked up a ton of political points.
January 3rd marked a turning point. The capture of Nicolas Maduro and the deal with Delcy Rodriguez has been the most successful operation to date of this second Trump administration. And the thing is, Marco Rubio played the leading role in that operation. It was his goal and his great victory.
Sale of the wealth of Venezuela in such a way that benefits the people, both of the United States, but also the people of Venezuela. And as a reminder to everyone, the president announced this just 2 days ago. Every penny, everything they buy with the money that they're making from the oil now, Mr. President, will be bought from America. And that includes everything from equipment for the oil industry to food to medicine and everything in between.
And that's not the end of it. It has also been leaked that he did not fully agree with the massive campaign against Iran, the most unpopular and potentially most disastrous US military offensive in recent years. While Pete Hegseth encouraged the president to take the plunge and dive headfirst into this hornet's nest, Rubio expressed far more doubts in the Situation Room. He advocated intervening, pressuring Iran, and striking specific targets as a serious deterrent, but not getting over their heads. And right now, it's highly likely that Trump regrets not having listened more to his Secretary of State, which, in the long run, will surely give him even more influence.
I think Marco will go down in history as the best Secretary of State. That's my opinion. Now, I admit I'm a little biased because I like him.
And you know what? This is starting to really worry the staunchest purists of the MAGA movement, because now they fear that Rubio could become a direct threat to their ability to control the party and the American right. Think of it this way, the polls aren't looking good. MAGA is undergoing major internal upheaval, and in that scenario, Rubio might seem like a more solid alternative to many donors and party heavyweights, which could end up sparking a massive political battle in the coming years. Though, don't go thinking that Rubio is a liberal, he's not at all. On domestic policy, he does support tough line policies, which means he isn't that far removed from MAGA on key issues like immigration. But on foreign policy, things change.
Marco Rubio's policies might shut the door to people like his grandfather. Mr. Rubio is not alone among the Republican presidential candidates in demanding a more vigilant refugee vetting process. So has Senator Ted Cruz of Texas, whose own father left Cuba.
In any case, here on the team, we've been asking each other several questions. What does Rubio's meteoric rise mean for the Republican Party? Is it a counterweight to the growing influence of MAGA? Could it signal the return of the old party and the overcoming of Trumpism? Will we perhaps see an open war over the succession? Pay close attention to everything we're about to tell you.
We care deeply about your future and ours. And if at times we disagree, our disagreements come from our profound sense of concern about a Europe with which we are connected. Not just economically, not just militarily. We are connected spiritually, and we are connected culturally. I believe that Europe must survive, because the two great wars of the last century serve for us as history's constant reminder that ultimately our destiny is and will always be intertwined with yours.
Before we get started, quick question. Have you ever landed in another country and suddenly realized your data isn't working? Or even worse, that you're about to get hit with crazy roaming charges? Yeah, not a great feeling. That's exactly why I switched to using Olafly's eSIM. And honestly, it's made traveling way more seamless. If you're not familiar with it, an eSIM is basically a digital SIM card. No physical card, no waiting around for delivery, no swapping anything in your phone. You just install it and you're good to go. With Olafly, you get coverage in more than 200 destinations, unlimited data, and the setup takes less than a minute. They'll even send everything straight to your email or WhatsApp. What really makes it stand out is how simple and transparent it is. A lot of providers limit your data or hit you with unexpected fees, but with Olafly, you get a clear, tailored plan with no surprises. And if your trip ends up being longer than planned, you can easily top up on the spot. No interruptions, no hassle. One of my favorite things, you can keep your regular SIM and your WhatsApp number, so staying connected with friends, family, or work is effortless. And if anything comes up, their 24/7 customer support connects you with real people, not bots, which makes a big difference. They've already sold over 15 million eSIMs worldwide, and with a 4.6 star rating on Trustpilot from more than 80,000 reviews, it's easy to see why so many travelers rely on them. Whether you're going to Japan, Italy, Mexico, the US, or pretty much anywhere, Olafly has you covered. They also offer Olafly Plans, a monthly subscription designed for longer trips, with coverage in over 160 destinations. And with the Always On feature, you'll still get 1 GB per month even after your plan expires, or if you cancel it. So if you want to travel without worrying about roaming fees or losing connection, Olafly is definitely worth checking out. You'll find the link in the description, where you can get 5% off any eSIM and 10% off Olafly plans using our code, so you can stay connected wherever you go. And now, back to our topic. Being Secretary of State of the United States of America is no small matter. It's one of the most powerful and influential positions in the world. After all, the State Department directs the foreign policy of the West's greatest military and economic power. Or at least that's what it's supposed to do. Because as you know, with Trump, everything goes through the White House. And there, Rubio, who has been in politics for 26 years, 15 of them at the highest level, first as a senator and now in the administration, has managed to carve out a niche for himself like no one else. He has positioned himself to such an extent that he is not only the Secretary of State, but also the President's National Security Advisor, which guarantees him a crucial role within the White House team, with all that entails.
If we look at what the administration is actually doing, not just what it says, the bellicose foreign policy one might have expected from President Rubio is clearly present in the policies of Trump's second term.
And the fact is, Rubio's shift has been tremendous. He has managed to carve out a very strong niche for himself in this administration.
The MAGA brain transplant on Rubio is complete. The Marco Rubio who used to talk about the importance of democracy and human rights and freedom of speech as part of U.S. foreign policy has disappeared.
And it's not just a political shift. He also has powerful allies. For example, he's known to have had a close relationship for many years with Susie Wiles, the powerful chief of staff who is also from Florida. In fact, it appears that Wiles played a major role in his selection as National Security Advisor. In any case, Rubio himself has ruled out any idea of running for the Republican nomination in 2028. He has said that he would only consider it if Vance drops out.
If J.D. Vance runs for president, he will be our candidate, and I will be one of the first people to support him.
Meanwhile, the reality is, the vice president isn't having the best of times. He's neither popular, nor are things going particularly well for him. His Silicon Valley support group has lost influence in the White House, and the president's agenda has led them to get deeply involved in Venezuela, Cuba, and Iran. This clashes head-on with the isolationist agenda championed by J.D. Vance. And not only that, to make matters worse, J.D. Vance is not popular at all. In fact, he isn't even popular within much of the Republican ranks.
J.D. Vance's 2028 presidential election chances plunge in new poll.
YouGov polls show a dramatic decline in the vice president's image, a decline even steeper than that of Trump himself. But between January and April of 2026 alone, support for a J.D. Vance candidacy in 2028 among voters who identify as Republicans and among independents who typically lean toward the Republican Party has dropped by more than 5 points. Right now, only 36% support this idea, a percentage that is starting to look very low when you consider that this candidacy was considered a sure thing not long ago. And it's not just about the polls. If we look at the betting markets, it's a very similar story. The odds of Vance being the candidate in 2028 have plummeted, while Marco Rubio is rapidly closing the gap. Just look, back in November, the odds that Vance would be the nominee stood at 60%, compared to just 7% for Marco Rubio. Today, the numbers are 39 to 21. In other words, Rubio has closed the 35-point gap with the vice president in less than 6 months, because, as I've already mentioned, there are more and more doubts. And on top of that, lately, nothing seems to be going right for him. As we've already said, the gap between him and the president's agenda seems to be growing wider. But on top of that, whenever he's been given a role lately, whether in Israel, Hungary, or in the negotiations with Iran, things haven't exactly gone well for him. And that has consequences.
Rubio gains early momentum in the hypothetical 2028 Republican primary race.
In fact, the Wall Street Journal reported on a meeting at Mar-a-Lago between Trump and key Republican donors right after the war with Iran began. I quote the Wall Street Journal verbatim. As attendees dined on jumbo crab and ribeye steaks, Trump asked the crowd, "What do you think of J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio?" The guests applauded louder for Rubio, according to people in the room. And the fact is, it's well known that the president has been asking a lot of questions in recent months precisely about this very issue. Questions that, by their very existence, pose a threat to the vice president. Because think about it, why ask something that's supposedly already decided? Well, because it clearly isn't. Also, keep an eye on this. Major pro-Israel donors in the Republican Party are wary of Vance's ties to people like Tucker Carlson and his perhaps weaker commitment to the Jewish state. And that's why they're leaking that they'd prefer to support Secretary of State Marco Rubio. And okay, some of you might be thinking, but Josh, he's the vice president. He has to be the candidate. Why? History tells us that's not how it works. Prior to 1960, vice presidents didn't amount to much unless they reached the Oval Office due to their president's death. death, their role was negligible. Starting in 1960, it's true that things changed. We began to see many vice presidents win their party's nominations, but the reality is that only 3 have managed to reach the Oval Office. Nixon, Eisenhower's vice president, who lost to Kennedy and only won many years later. George H.W. Bush, who effectively inherited power from Ronald Reagan. And Biden, who ran for office 4 years after leaving the vice presidency. So only one, George Bush, managed to win the Oval Office immediately after leaving the vice presidency. That means that being vice president doesn't automatically make you a candidate, much less a winning candidate. Keep that clearly in mind. Of course, the truth is that this isn't the whole story either.
Marco is my closest friend in the administration. I think it's so interesting that the media wants to create this conflict where there just isn't any conflict.
For now, Vance and Rubio seem to have a good relationship. And besides, Vance isn't just vice president. He also chairs the Republican Party's powerful finance committee, and he's raising a lot of money and building a strong list of supporters with full wallets. In just the last few weeks, he's been on a tour of breakfasts, lunches, and dinners that are estimated to have raised over $60 million for the Republicans. Then, regarding money from pro-Israel donors, what is the vice president doing? Well, he's trying to win over the strongest pro-Israel supporter and one of the largest donor bases within the Republican Party, Miriam Adelson, the widow of casino magnate Sheldon Adelson. Not only that, clearly he maintains his very close relationship with Peter Thiel and many Silicon Valley billionaires. And we all know that in US elections, money matters. And it matters a lot. That's why many believe that the plan for a joint candidacy remains the most likely scenario.
They are good people. Well, we have great people. I don't have to get into that, but we have one of them standing right here. We have JD, obviously. The vice president is great. I think Marco's great. I think, I'm not sure if anybody would run against us. I think if they ever formed a group, it would be unstoppable.
In any case, it's highly likely that what ends up happening in Cuba will be decisive. Cuba could become Trump's great legacy. So, if that operation were to succeed, Rubio could be crowned. Having said that, one important point. Trump can't fire Vance, but he could fire the current Secretary of State. And let's face it, right now, that obviously doesn't seem likely. But the truth is that this president is a shredder of top officials, particularly in the state and national security departments. Today, you might be on the best of terms with him, and tomorrow he might get tired of you and show you the door. And if you don't believe me, just ask Rex Tillerson, John Bolton, McMaster, Mike Waltz, Pompeo, General Kellogg. Well, the list goes on. What's more, the Trump administration has been in power for just over a year, and my goodness, how bad the approval ratings are. If they don't change course, perhaps the Republican candidate won't end up being either one of these two men, which wouldn't be at all that surprising. In fact, generally speaking, presidential candidates in the United States tend to be quite unexpected. Perhaps a governor, a senator, or an outsider. In fact, an early escalating war could lead to precisely that scenario. The protagonists of this story know this, and that's why they'll be very careful not to make a move in public. But yes, Rubio's rise has been meteoric. But now that we've gotten this far, it's your turn. What role do you think Marco Rubio will play in the coming years? Can the Secretary of State ramp up his own political ambition and challenge Vance for a position? Or will the two of them end up forming a strong ticket for the Republicans? Which of the two should take the lead? And why? Leave your thoughts in the comments below and let's start the discussion. And very importantly, if you like this video, hit the like button and subscribe to VisualPolitik if you haven't already. Thank you so very much for watching. All the best. I'll catch you in the next one.